So one of the fragrances that I speak a lot about on this channel was originally launched in the late 1800s. So go figure, a fragrance I speak about quite often on this channel launched so long ago. I'm talking about Fougere Royale from the house of HOUBIGANT. So this is not a video about Fougere Royale, it's about fragrances that I have in my collection that were launched so long ago. And I put a cutoff date of 1975, and we've got 12 fragrances here going back to almost late 1800s to 1975. So I'm putting together a video for you today of classic men's fragrances that are the oldest in the collection here that I wanted to highlight to you guys to find out what some of the best classic men's fragrances are today. Some have been redone to modernize them, some have just been, modernized, but nobody really says that they have, but you can tell. But they're great fragrances that I think should be highlighted. And those of you that like classic fragrances definitely need to get your noses on these fragrances. So today I've got 12 classic men's fragrances here that I'm going to talk to you about that are some of the oldest existing fragrances for men. Find out what they are coming right up. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yesterday we're talking about older men's classic fragrances dating all the way back to the late 1800s all the way to 1975. I don't have every fragrance in the world, and I put together this list of 12 fragrances, and as I said, I put a cutoff date of 1975. I felt like anything that came before then was pretty old. And these are really great fragrances. I speak about them quite often. And so we'll start with HOUBIGANT's Fougere Royale. That is the oldest fragrance that I have in my collection. This version is the 2010 fragrance or version, originally launched in 1882, created by Paul Parquet, and he was basically trying to recreate this fragrance of a fern leaf. So basically Fougere means fern or fern-like in French, and so it's Fougere Royale. So it features notes of lavender, geranium, oakmoss, green notes, clary sage, carnation, chamomile. So I would say this is probably one of the first barbershop fragrances, and it makes sense. Does it smell like the fern or the fern leaf? To me, ferns have a very, very faint light smell. And I could see that they're what they're going after to make it smell like that. I don't think it smells like it, but I think it's a fairly great fragrance. Personally, I've never been able to put my nose on the original. I should eventually do that someday with the Osmotec in France. But what Rodrigo Flores-Roux did in 2010 with HOUBIGANT's Fougere Royale, I think he did a great job. This is the Eau de Parfum version. I do have the Parfum version as well, which tends to be a lot thicker and denser, a lot more luxurious. But if you're a man that likes classic fragrances, definitely get your nose on HOUBIGANT's Fougere Royale. Probably one of the best barbershop fragrances. And I should also say, I felt like Amouage's Bracken Man had similarities to Fougere Royale, but Bracken Man is discontinued now. And also Bracken Man was focusing more on spices. It had a very spicy edge to it with the overdose of cloves in that fragrance. Here we've got Carnation, which tends to be a bit clove-like, but for me I think the focus here is definitely on the lavender and the geranium. But either way, Fougere Royale is a great fragrance. It's a historic fragrance. Those of you that are men that like masculine classic fragrances should get your nose on it, and definitely wanted to highlight here as it being one of the oldest existing fragrances in my collection. If you're a fan of HOUBIGANT's Fougere Royale, do let me know, put a comment down so I can find out. But let's go ahead and jump forward to 1934. This is a fragrance that my dad wore, and I've been obsessed with it ever since I remember it as a kid. This is from the house of CARON. This is Pour un Homme de CARON, this one right here. So I've got the most recent version, and the greenness has kind of gone a little neon green, kind of a bluish green. It used to be a lot more green, and kind of a green like, maybe like this. A little lighter than that, but now the color has gone a bit more bluish green. The smell to me is still very similar to the original. So this was originally launched in 1934, created by Ernest Daldroff, and I would say this is an aromatic fougere, maybe more of a warm amber fougere. It features notes of lavender with vanilla, musk, geranium, ambergris, and lime. So CARON was recently purchased by, I believe, the Rothschild family. So at one time, a lot of CARON fragrances were available at the discounters for really, really great prices. But within the last year and a half to 2 years, post-pandemic, or the start of the pandemic I should say, there's less stock out there, and I had to bring back a bottle of this with me from France recently. In fact, I bought 2 bottles, a 200 ml bottle, and then the recent bottle, the more current bottle like this, the older bottle, I mean the 200 ml bottle was the original color. But as I said, they do smell very similar. So you can't find a lot of stock out there now at the discounters, but I was just saying there were plenty out there. But either way, this is a great scent if you can get your hands on it. I don't know if there's any retailers currently in the States selling this in public. I think you might find some stuff online, but the CARON boutique also ships to the USA. I've purchased stuff from there and they've delivered it all nice. But this is a great fragrance. It's once again lavender. It's a fougere again. But to me, with the fact that it has the vanilla in here, it creates for a bit of an amberiness. There's musk in here. It does create a kind of amber musk thing. But for me, it's the lavender and the vanilla together to create this kind of a very warm and cozy wearing experience. It's a great bed scent for me, especially when it was, you know, plentiful at the discounters, and you can get 120, is it 120 or 125 ml bottle for you know, around 35-40 bucks. So still, you can still wear it as a bed scent, but to me it's a great scent and always reminds me of my dad. Always reminds me of my dad. He wore this stuff and I could smell it and I go, okay, yeah, I remember when he wore this, and I remember when I first discovered it way back in the 70s. But either way, a great historic fragrance. The cool thing is this one, and you know, Fougere Royale has survived and still here for us to smell and wear, obviously. And it's great that they are still around for us to kind of, you know, travel back to the old days to see what people or men were wearing back then, and then to kind of like redo that experience and wear the fragrances today. Of course, they are very modernized to today's you know, noses and things like that, but still very great quality fragrances and definitely deserve to be discussed. So that's Pour un Homme de CARON from the house of CARON. I hope you guys can find it. I hope they'll appear at discounters. And I'm glad the brand didn't fold. It's a historic house from France that definitely has really great quality fragrances, and I think the standout for men is definitely Pour un Homme de CARON. So I wanted to make sure the fragrances were available still, not discontinued fragrances, because I can put this list together with a ton of discontinued fragrances, but the theme of this video is that they're still selling. They're so old, but they're still selling, you know? This next one, though, I think might be on its way out. I purchased a bottle of it from FragranceNet for a very good price. I don't see it on FragranceNet, but I do see it on eBay and places like that. You can find it for about 35, 40, 50 bucks for 100 ml. This is DUNHILL for Men, if I can find the actual label on the front here without my glasses on. DUNHILL for Men launched in 1934. It's been around for quite some time. Actually, the CARON and both the CARON and the DUNHILL for Men will be celebrating 100 years old in you know, in about 11 years, so they'll become 100 years old. But this is a great classic men's fragrance. It's very woody and spicy with aromatic touches. For me, also a bit of chypre touches as well. Created by Michael Pickthall. Again, it's a woody, spicy fragrance. It features notes of cedarwood. There's leather, there's lemons, clove, jasmine, rose, clary sage, vetiver, chamomile, lavender, musk, and tonka beans. It's interesting. A lot of men's fragrances, especially classic ones, did utilize a lot of lemons. I don't find lemons too much in men's fragrances as of late. They'll use bergamot, but bergamot and lemon smell so different, so different. Bergamot is a lot softer, and not as tart and astringent like lemons can be. This stuff can be a bit astringent, but also the bergamot has this kind of softness and a bit more floralcy, along with the fact that it's a citrus. So they don't use a lot of lemons in fragrances. I love lemons in fragrances, but there's definitely very, very in-your-face kind of a fruit. And this one, you know, you've got the combination of all the woods and spices together, but that lemon just jumps right at you. You also have the leather in here along with the cedarwood, and you do experience a little bit of some aromatics in there, and the rosiness does pop through as well. But some of the notes, they don't use, you know, they're not classic fragrances, I should say. Did utilize a lot of other notes that they don't utilize a lot nowadays. As I was saying, the lemons is one. In the previous fragrance, or the Fougere Royale, there's an overdose of chamomile. There's cloves that don't come up too frequently. And a lot of these like very, very classic fragrances do have these notes. And at one time, I think these were very, very popular notes and ingredients that were used quite frequently in fragrances. And we can experience them here. And this is a really, really great classic men's, very, very gentlemanly fragrance, and a classic house. I believe DUNHILL for Men is the first fragrance from the house of DUNHILL. I could be wrong, but I believe it is the first fragrance. And if you can get a bottle, get it, because it's still fairly inexpensively out there. I don't see that fragrance net, sadly, but there's you know, stock out there at various places. And if you're a fan of fragrances like this, again, it's a woody, spicy, but I would say it's kind of bordering Fougere and a Chypre together. So it's very, very woody, spicy, and also very lemony as well. So either way, DUNHILL for Men from 1934, a great scent that you should definitely get your nose on. But moving on to the house of Floris, another British house. This is number 89, this one right here. This one to me does remind me a little bit of Habit Rouge, which is coming up. And I think the Habit Rouge was inspired by this fragrance. I don't know if it was, but it could be. This launched in 1951, could be considered a woody aromatic Fougere style fragrance, and of course it features lots of lavender. We've got lavender here, neroli, there's orris, orange, bergamot, nutmeg, sandalwood, cedarwood, vetiver, musk, oakmoss, and rose. Yeah, it does remind me a little bit of Habit Rouge, but stripped away of the vanillic touches of Habit Rouge. This one doesn't have much, if any, vanillic touches, but if I strip away the vanilla or the ambery touches from Habit Rouge, I pretty much get the fragrance, because to me it smells like it. It reminds me of it, but it doesn't have that warmth that the Habit Rouge has. So if you like the idea of Habit Rouge, but you always felt like it was a bit too warm, vanillic, ambery kind of thing like that, you should definitely try number 89, because as I was saying, it's got everything pretty much to remind me of Habit Rouge, but it's stripped away from that warmth and vanillic touches. The other thing I should say about number 89 is that there's definitely a muskiness in there that you can totally experience. These fragrances are very classic. You're going to really, really experience the classic touches of these fragrances. Those of you that are used to what's selling at Macy's now might find these a bit too mature to wear, a bit too grandpa or a dad-like. But man, these are the fragrances that, you know, our fathers and grandfathers and their fathers and grandfathers were wearing, and so definitely need to be highlighted. And the fact that they're still out there and still going pretty strong is a great thing. And I like to, you know, refer back to what people were wearing back then and think, gosh, people's tastes were so different back then. Now all fragrances for men seem to be going very unisex and very sweet, and, you know, sweet notes are very, very popular. Sweet fragrances are very popular. But these fragrances, to me, were uber masculine in comparison to what women were wearing. Although, I feel like some women's fragrances of the classics were also pretty, I don't know. I don't know if I would call it masculine in a way, because there were overdose of florals, but some of the notes in there, like oak moss and patchouli and woods and leather, kind of made them a lot more masculine. But either way, number 89 is a great fragrance from a classic British house, Floris. Let me know if you're a fan of that one, if you've sampled it. I'd like to find out. Alright, moving on to the house of Guerlain. We're not talking about Habit Rouge yet, because this is going in the timeline of launch. This is the first men's fragrance. Well, I don't know if I would call this a first men's fragrance, but maybe it is. It's Vetiver from the house of Guerlain. And Vetiver from the house of Guerlain has been around since 1959. It's gone through so many different bottles, This is the latest bottle. It's now in a similar bottle to the L'Homme Ideal collection. I don't know why Guerlain decided to do this. They've done so many changes over and over throughout the years. I hope they stick to something. And I feel like also it has gotten lighter here, although it could also be the fact that this was a very new batch when I bought it, so it needed to age or mature a little bit. It hadn't macerated too much. But either way, it's vetiver. It utilizes loads of vetiver, and it's created by Jean-Paul Guerlain, you know, obviously from the family behind the brand. So it's a woody aromatic fragrance, and it features notes of vetiver, of course, bergamot, tobacco, lemons, pepper, nutmeg, oak moss, neroli, mandarin, leather, myrrh, and sage. There's a lot of notes in here. You do experience the vetiver quite a bit. There's definitely a citrusy presence here for sure, and I feel like this version in this bottle seems a lot fresher in comparison to the previous versions, which seemed a little deeper and denser and woodier. But you know, along the way you'll experience some tobacco touches, spices, some flowers, and maybe some light resins as well. Of course, the aromatics, because there's all kinds of things happening in here. But for me, it's all about vetiver with citruses, and everything else comes in, you know, as an afterthought. You'll notice them, but you're pretty much wearing a vetiver-y, citrus vetiver-y fragrance. It's great. I wore plenty of this stuff. I've gone through so many bottles. I started wearing it towards the late 90s, and I've been a fan since then. And it does have a mature quality about it, but it's vetiver. You can find vetiver fragrances now. They're very, very popular, and this is probably one of the most popular. Although I almost highlighted Carvan's vetiver as well. I left it off because I don't think it's as popular as Guerlain's vetiver, but I believe the Carvan came out before, maybe a few years before Guerlain's vetiver, so maybe did they copy Carvan? Either way, moving on to the house of Jacques Fath. And a lot of these are designer houses, some are not. Jacques Fath used to be a designer house, and they are no longer a designer house, and I would consider them more of a niche house because all they do is fragrances now. This is Green Water, originally launched in Whoa, you know what? I kind of made a mistake. I feel like my timeline has shifted. So Green Water, I believe, launched in 47. Perhaps it's 57. I might have my dates wrong, but I believe it launched in 47. This is the version created by Cécile Zarokian in 2016. So the fragrance has been around since the 40s, originally created by Vincent Roubert, and now obviously redone by Cécile Zarokian. I believe my dad wore this fragrance. I can't remember for sure as I was a little kid. But this is considered a green citrus aromatic fragrance with neroli. There's mint, there's vetiver, bergamot, mandarin, amber, basil, oak moss, and tarragon. So there's loads of aromatics here, and of course the juicy citruses. When you wear this fragrance, you'll really, really feel like all these aromatics were soaking in the citruses, and you're gonna, you know, kind of spritzing yourself with all the juice of the citruses with the aromatics. But along the way, you'll have some woodsy touches. Of course, the vetiver is in here for sure. And you also have the citrus floral touch as well to kind of give you a little more depth, a kind of a floral depth. It might remind you a little bit of Guerlain's vetiver, but in this case we're less vetiver and then more citruses and aromatics. So, I mean, when you smell it, there's definitely the reminder of the vetiver part of Guerlain's vetiver in here. But again, it's an overdose with loads of juicy citruses and aromatics, and the green kind of aromatics as well. But it's a great scent. Are you a fan of this version of Green Water or a previous version? I think it's a great fragrance. I'm sorry I somehow did my timeline wrong, but this did launch in 1947 from what I remember. So it should have come before Vetiver and number 89. But either way, Green Water, a great classic fragrance. Originally launched as a men's fragrance, it's now a unisex offering. So go figure. So really there's no rules with fragrances. Wear it you like when you like, because obviously now it's considered unisex because it is under the brand as a niche house instead of a designer kind of a thing. So anyway, okay, so as I was planning the video, I guess I screwed up my dates, guys. I apologize. So this is another fragrance that came out in the 40s. This is from the house of Rocha. This is Moustache. So this is the original Moustache. The current version is so different. It's more modern, it's more sweet, it's more ambery. Here we got something very citrusy, mossy, woody, and aromatic. Originally launched in 49, as I said. This was brought back during the launch of the Moustache EDP, which, as I said, is totally different than this. If you think you're gonna get this fragrance thinking it's the EDP, don't get it, because they smell nothing alike. They're completely different fragrances. But this was brought back in, I believe, in 2018, because they were bringing a new fragrance called the Moustache EDP, or Eau de Parfum. The original is created in 1949 by Edmond Rudnitska. And again, as I said, it's a aromatic fragrance with woods and mossiness. And of course, Edmond Rudnitska is a very well-known perfumer. He created a ton of Dior fragrances, among other brands' fragrances. But this features notes of moss, lavender, violets, bergamot, lemon zest, patchouli, neroli, and musk. And I do have to be honest, the musk is pretty prominent in here, and it's a slight bit animalic on me. It is. It does have a bit of a reminder of Eau Sauvage, which is coming down the line here as well. But I really like the way this smells because the musk is very fuzzy. There's definitely like a little animalic fuzziness in here with its muskiness, which is a nice contrast with all the citruses and aromatics in here. And that's what makes it different than something like Eau Sauvage, that fuzzy muskiness that's present in here that's not in Eau Sauvage. Eau Sauvage has been very, very modernized and made, you know, perfect as a citrus aromatic. For me, it's mostly a citrus fragrance. Here, you do have a bit of a challenging masculine touch with that fuzzy muskiness. But man, this is really, really great. If you don't know this fragrance, check it out. This is nothing like Moustache EDP. Totally different. Totally, totally different. This is definitely very, very classic, and it smells fantastic and definitely deserves to be checked out. So it's Moustache Original Eau de Toilette from 1949. Then moving on to Habit Rouge. This is from 1965. Again, my date's a bit off. Sorry about that. But Habit Rouge EDT launched in 65. And it does remind me, as I said, to number 89 from Floris. But they're different because this one definitely has a very vanillic touch. And from what I've read, Habit Rouge is the male answer to something like Shalimar from Guerlain. Once again, created by Jean-Paul Guerlain, and this features notes of lemons, amber, bergamot, vanilla, spicy notes, leather, neroli, bitter orange, cedar, lime, and patchouli. It's a fantastic fragrance. For a while there, I was really into the Eau de Parfum version of this. Now I've really embraced the lemoniness and the contrast of the fresh, citrusy, juicy, tart, astringent lemon that's in here with the warmth of the amber and the vanilla. It's a nice contrast. I kind of really like that, and that gives me that kind of classic vibe. As I was saying earlier, lemons are not used as frequently in male fragrances as they once were, and I really like that kind of punch with the lemon that's in here. But along the way, you've got leathery touches, definitely, you know, woods in here and earthiness and things like that. But a wonderful, wonderful fragrance. Definitely one that you should check out if you like classic men's fragrances, and definitely very, very historic. This was modernized in the early 2000s, and so it's definitely not what it used to be back then. But I don't really remember what it used to be back then, so either way, I think it's a great fragrance. Alright, I think my timeline is now back to normal. I apologize for the mix-up with the dates there, but of course, you'll know when I've mentioned them. But this next one is from 1966, came a year after Guerlain's Habit Rouge. This is Eau Sauvage. And again, I was saying earlier, the difference between a Moustache EDT with the Eau Sauvage. Eau Sauvage, to me, I think is a very citrusy fragrance. There's not a lot of challenging things. The Moustache EDT, the current version, I definitely experience a lot of muskiness, so it could be a bit off-putting. There's definitely a fuzzy muskiness there. Here, it's just mostly citruses and aromatics. You know, I don't know who created this one. Was it Edmond Rudnitska once again? Oh yeah, this is Edmond Rudnitska. He created both of them, actually, come to think of it. It's a citrus aromatic, and it features notes of bergamot, hedione, lavender, oakmoss, patchouli, basil, lemon, vetiver, and petitgrain. So it's a who's who of citruses and aromatics, beautifully blended with a light touch of vetiver. The vetiver in here is not overdosed. In the EDP or the Parfum version, it's really, really amplified, but here it's in the background because it's basically swimming in juicy, you know, shiny, sparkling mixing citruses with aromatics with the floral touches in there as well. And you know, it's a beautiful fragrance. I really love it. Eau Sauvage, fantastic and very, very classic male fragrance that definitely deserves to be mentioned. And then also from the same year, we've got Aramis here. Beautiful classic masculine leather chypre fragrance for men, which my dad wore once again. Launched in '66, created by Bernard Chant, one of my favorite classic perfumers. Really love the stuff this guy did. He did some amazing, amazing creations. And this is, again, leather, woody, chypre fragrance. Features notes of leather, leaves, clary sage, sandalwood, vetiver, cardamom, cloves, jasmine, patchouli. It's an amazing fragrance. To this day, it still smells like very, very similar to what it used to smell like. I remember this quite a lot. My dad wore so much of it. And also, it does seem thinner though. It's just gotten lighter, just very, very light, but it's a fantastic fragrance, and it totally takes me back to when I was very, very young when my dad wore this stuff, but very historic. Now, there was a collection of fragrances that Aramis relaunched towards the end of 2000s. I think that collection is kind of on its way out, sadly, and those are the fragrances like Devon, the Havana, all these fragrances that were in kind of square bottles. Sadly, I believe those are being folded and, you know, discontinued. But this still keeps selling. They still sell it at Macy's. Definitely a historic fragrance that's worth mentioning. Definitely came before 1975. If you're a fan of Aramis by Aramis, do let me know. Put a comment down below so I can find out. But a wonderful classic men's fragrance for sure. Alright, we've got two more fragrances left, and we've got two from the year 1975. First of which is Givenchy Gentleman, the original Givenchy Gentleman from 1975. It's considered a woody fragrance, and it's created by Paul Leger. Features notes of vetiver, cinnamon, leather, patchouli, tarragon. Again, tarragon, they don't use this note in men's fragrances much anymore. Of course, they'll use leather, patchouli, cinnamon, maybe a toss-up, vetiver for sure. And I think these are the kind of notes that make fragrances very unique back in the day, because they really focus on these really intense spices and very unique aromatics like the tarragon and the cinnamon. But this to me also has animalic qualities. I feel like there's probably the note of castoreum in here. There's definitely a very leathery touch in here. A very, very masculine, musky, but a beautiful, beautiful fragrance. It's fantastic. To me, it's a patchouli bomb, and I absolutely love it, and totally takes me back to, you know, the days of when patchouli was really, really heavily used. Perfect timing for this to come out in 1975. So this is Gentleman Givenchy from the house of, actually it's Givenchy Gentleman, I should say. So it's from the house of Givenchy. And then finally, the last fragrance I'm going to talk to you about, also launched in 1975, is Grey Flannel, this one right here. Who's a fan of this one? This is not for everyone, and it's also a very green fragrance. I would call this an aromatic green fragrance, launched in '75, created by Andre Fromentin. Not too familiar with this particular perfumer. I think he's done a great job here, and interesting that it still survives to this day from such a long time ago. And I don't know if the brand is still existing. I think I see some clothing sold by this brand, but not much. I don't see it much, but the fragrance is fantastic. Really, really love it. It's one of the greenest violet fragrances that I have in my collection. It features notes of oak moss, violet, vetiver, iris, neroli, petitgrain, cedar, tonka beans, geranium, mimosa. Really, really masculine fragrance. This is another fragrance my dad wore, and I remember he had the one with the pouch, the gray pouch it came in, and always really intrigued me for some reason, because I knew all fragrances came in boxes, and this one always had that pouch, so it really kind of intrigued me. But the fragrance itself is a who's who of aromatics and spices, and really, really like green notes. To me, it's violet leaves, not the violet flower. It's got an ozonic vibe. It's got a bitter vibe from the galbanum. It's perfection for me. And to me, to this day, it smells fantastic. Really does. Really, really smells great. And you can get it for around 20 bucks for 100 ml. So Grey Flannel, very historic fragrance. These are some of the oldest fragrances in my collection. Of course, the oldest is Fougere Royale. And then you've got all the way down to, you know, Givenchy Gentleman and also Grey Flannel from 1975. Maybe I'll do a version of this video with feminine fragrances, although I have more men's fragrances than feminine fragrances, but who knows, maybe one day I'll do something like that. But either way, let me know your thoughts on these fragrances. Are you a fan of these fragrances? Have you smelled these fragrances, and maybe you're younger and you don't appreciate fragrances like this? Do let me know. Put a comment down below so I can find out. But either way, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please do list below. Please like this video, please share it, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.